Let's go Pac-12. You got the graphic for us? This is going to be pretty quick, by the way, on ASU because they're under investigation for some sanctions from coaching to potentially players. I don't know what their team's going to be looking like necessarily come football time, a couple days before they play. Could be different from what we're looking at now. So I wouldn't gamble on their stuff. I'm surprised that they're even offering it some places, to be completely honest. I think it did adjust down a little, but they're my fifth-rated team in the Pac-12, assuming they have their personnel that they have right now. So if you want to take that for what it's worth, that's great, but I wouldn't bother with ASU stuff. If anything, you could try to play unders if you were looking that direction anyway. There's upside to either some coaching changes or players that won't be allowed to play at all. So we will see what comes of that investigation the next month, but I would just pass personally. We'll go to my cool college, my hometown team that everyone where I lived was a UCLA fan. I grew up in the Santa Clarita Valley in Valencia, California. UCLA was the life, and all of my friends jumped ship when Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and Pete Carroll started winning games for USC, and they all pretended they were Trojans fans their entire life, and it's BS. I stuck with the Bruins. Hey, I know, Quan, you're working on something, but actually I do have a question for you, a serious one, not a joke. What are your thoughts on Chip Kelly as a whole as a coach?
That's a good question. I don't like spread offenses and RPOs.
Why?
But I just think I'm more of a traditional like drop back. West
No
Coast
kickers.
guy.
Yeah.
And no kickers. Absolutely no kickers. I think it's it's gimmicky. I hate playing against like wing T offenses and teams that do like deceptive stuff because just from a defensive perspective, there's a lot to prepare for, and that gives him an advantage. So I think what he did at Oregon was great. What he did in the NFL didn't work just because I don't think you can, or maybe he was ahead of his time, and now everybody's doing the RPO.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You said like it's a lot more to prepare for. It gives them an advantage. And you said it's like a gimmicky offense. Now everyone's running RPO mostly. Yeah. And everyone says he failed in Philadelphia. He won 10 or 11 games in 3 of his 4 seasons there.
He was above 500 too.
One of the years they won 10 games and didn't make the playoffs, so it looked like they failed. But I think he's like changed the game of football more than anyone else probably the last 15 years. And anyway, I'm just curious what your general sentiment is about him because he's probably my favorite coach of all time in college football.
I think it's that evolution of the game that people are afraid to, I guess, step into.
Sure. You don't want to embrace it, but now everyone's embracing it. It's working in the NFL too.
Yeah.
There's ways to do it maybe in a better fashion. I think he was managing the Eagles more than he should have.
Yes.
As from a front office perspective, there was some beef and strife there, which understandably so. Like you're just the head coach, do your thing. So that probably wasn't great and didn't hurt his help his reputation. But I like Chip Kelly. I was excited UCLA got him. They've, I think, taken advantage of, since he was at Oregon, going fast, going with RPOs because it was something that other teams hadn't seen. They were able to kind of snipe all the expected value that was out there for the taking. Now everyone's kind of doing it. They did something last year defensively that's really interesting, and I'm wondering if he's trying to get ahead of the curve from a defensive perspective. But UCLA, since he's taken over, hasn't had a very good defense. Okay, let me pull this up. I'm going to make sure I have the numbers. Defensively, they ranked 104th in success rate in the country, and this is a year where a few teams didn't even play, so I think it's out of 127 teams. Usually it was 104th. But they were top 5 in defending explosive offensive plays, which we've looked at a lot over the last few years. Look at the data, like offenses that are explosive. That is correlated to winning and covering. And if defensively you're allowing teams to nickel and dime you, but not get the big explosive play, maybe they're settling for more field goals or they're forcing things in the red zone. It is harder to score a touchdown, when you're inside the 10 or whatever, inside the red zone than from further out. Maybe your offense is getting explosive plays. We didn't even talk about Dorian Thompson-Robinson yet. He's been fantastic. He's going to be his 4th year under center with Chip Kelly. But defensively, I haven't seen a split where you're 104th in success rate, but top 5 in the country in explosiveness. Usually, if you're 104th in success rate, it's because your defense stinks and you're giving up explosive plays, and that's why your success rate grades out so low. So to be that low, but so good in defending explosive plays and limiting your opponents. By the way, it's one of the reasons I think a lot of the UCLA games went under last year, is this change defensively that they made. I'm very intrigued. This is a long way to say just because it's kind of an analytics and game theory discussion in general, but I am a Bruins fan. I'm not sure what to make of it and if it's trustworthy, if it's like going to be a constant thing that's like doable or manageable. To have that low and grade that low on success rate, but be so good. It could also be that the offenses against them missed a couple long balls more than some other teams, right? Otherwise, their explosiveness rating defensively maybe would have been like 30th, right? Like it could be a few things that swung this. It's hard to know. You could go through the play-by-play data and try to make an assumption. I haven't gone that deep into it, but the context is iffy enough that I don't want to try to guess where UCLA is headed this direction this season. I think it could be really positive because I think their offense, fourth year with DTR, Chip Kelly and everything, and then with a defense that finally stepped up last year as a whole, it could be really good. I think the 7 wins, you can put up that graphic when you get a chance again, Quan. I believe it's 7 just about everywhere, right? I think that's spot on. That's right where I have my projection. So I'm not betting UCLA, but I did want to just kind of bring to light what happened. Really something I haven't seen before from that defense in a weird COVID year too. On top of it, there's just a ton of uncertainty. I'm not sure I can trust it, but I'm going to be following closely first couple games into the year. There's a chance UCLA is a lot better. There's a chance their defense overall regresses, and they're only winning 4 or 5 games too. So that's why I'm staying away, but I'm intrigued. Stanford, a team that everybody generally has liked over the years. Their recruiting under Shaw has dipped every year. The last 4, I believe this year's by far the worst. Maybe since he took over, or maybe it was just after his first 2 or 3 seasons, but it's been 7 or 8 years that they've graded outside the top 40 in recruiting grades. And that's where they're at. And now they're playing a schedule that I believe I have the 10th toughest in all of college football. And let me actually just pull it up, because outside of the fact that they have to play in the Pac-12, which isn't the toughest schedule as a whole, right? It's not the best conference in football, but they play in the North, where you have to play Oregon and Washington, who are top 4 teams in the conference. They also then, out of the South, get the best 4 teams out of the South. Just the luck of the draw this year. They have to play USC, Utah, ASU, and UCLA. And on top of that, they have no gimmies in non-conference. The one you would maybe say is Vanderbilt out of the SEC or Kansas State out of the Big 12. Like, neither of those are locks either. So they have to play Notre Dame at the end of the year. They close the season with Notre Dame and the Irish. So it's just a really tough schedule for Stanford. I could try to tell you that they're going to be better, bounce back for Shaw, but the recruiting doesn't show that they're going to be. They don't have receivers now trying to catch passes from a brand new quarterback after Davis Mills departed. Tanner McKee, he actually got back from his LDS mission. He might be the new quarterback. They also have another junior that could take over, who's just kind of been there playing backup for a while. Maybe knows the system better. McKee has technically the better grades as far as his recruiting goes. He's a freshman, but he's an older freshman. He's 6'4", 215. I don't trust it. Their defense, by the way, that's the thing with Shaw. It's always been, they can rely on their defense. And so they finally had an offense last year that graded out pretty well with Mills. They were top 20 in EPA per pass and run. When is the last time Stanford's offense has been that good? The year that they ranked 115th against the run and 115th against the pass. Stanford could not defend anybody. And now their actual talent, with the recruiting grades dropping significantly, I don't know how they're going to replenish or get that defense better. They're probably some sort of weirdness with being in California and the COVID stuff early in the year. They probably didn't get to practice as much as other teams. Granted, a lot of teams in the Pac-12, we're going to talk about another one in a second. Cal Berkeley, they're locally in a similar boat. I don't understand it. You can get 4.5 on a total that I think is going to be 4 or fewer wins, way often enough for that to be a value bet. So I like Stanford under, and we're going to go with it with that schedule, with a ton of question marks on the offense and a defense that just, look, this is no longer the Shaw, Stanford, slow, like hold everyone defense that you're accustomed to the last few years. And they also don't have the talent coming in to try to fix it. So I think it's going to be rough. And look, the season starts Kansas State, USC, Vanderbilt. There's a chance they're 2-1 there, and this is going to be a sweat. But at that point, if they're 1-2, and then you have to start playing teams that are all better than you, outside of, I think, Oregon State. I think I only project them to be a favorite in 3 games this year. So it's going to be tough. Let's move on to Cal. By the way, there are 4s on Stanford. I wouldn't bet a 4. I would just play the 4.5s. I know there's some 4s that are plus money. I'd prefer to just go 4.5 in the minus 130 range, kind of as a the tipping point. Cal's at 6, which is interesting. Cal and Stanford as a whole, my numbers have them about equals. Cal's a fraction of a point lower in my power ratings. But I like over 6 some. I have them like 6.7. You can get plus 100 to minus 110 on the over 6. I think that's worthwhile. I also saw 6.5s at plus 145, which is a very similar bet. I think that's fine too if that's something that you're looking at. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're not playing a top 10 schedule like Stanford is. So if you're wondering why their win total is 1.5 higher than Stanford's, it has a lot to do with who they're facing, right? I also think it's interesting. Cal was pretty hyped going into last year, deserved. Look, Justin Wilcox comes over from Wisconsin, defensive coordinator there, top defense, and he brings it over to Cal, and they were phenomenal. Multiple years, they could not really get an offense going, and Chase Garbers was going to be the guy. They were bringing back a ton of talent last year, and then they had this weird COVID setup where I believe they only played 4 games total. They had a bunch of cancellations. They didn't play for a few weeks in where when they finally played UCLA in their opener, I think UCLA had already played 2 or 3 games. They got run out. They couldn't tackle. They couldn't score until I think the fourth quarter. UCLA finally gave them like a pity TD at the end. Cal, it was just they were all out of sorts, and it was harder in California in general. The COVID stuff, the restrictions were more strict than other states. So you don't want to throw that out completely, but you also want to recognize that this is a team that was really being hyped up with, I think it's 16 of those players that were going to be playing last year that was getting all the hype are back this year too. And now it's like everyone's forgetting that this team projects to be better than 500. I think they do for sure. I think Garbers, from the fact that he can make throws, but on top of that, move the ball, mobility with his feet, goes a long way. And then defensively, look, Wilcox defenses are awesome. Even last year in their down year, and defensively they had the weird UCLA game where they literally couldn't tackle. They graded out above average both against the pass and the rush and EPA and success rate. It was mostly the offense that was out of sorts. I think that gets fixed. They have plenty of talent around them and a really good rushing game along with Garbers in the run game. So got to go over the 6. My numbers like it. And then under the 4.5 on Stanford, but only 4.5s there. I wouldn't play the 4. And that sums it up. Those are our teams for today. We're going to go over the final 4 Pac-12 teams